everybody. Thank you for joining us on Prop Talk. We are live here at NAA Apartmentalize in the peachy state of Georgia in Atlanta.
Hot Atlanta. It is hot this week.
Yeah, you know, last time we were here, which was what, 5 or 6 years ago? I think it might have been 6. And that's what I've been referring to as hot Atlanta. It was hot. It was like 98 degrees.
Yeah.
But this is actually, it's not that bad.
The evenings have been getting cool. It's nice, yeah.
Well, I have to say, I'm so glad that you agreed to join me, especially given the long history we have. I was a big fan. Rich George is the NOI coach. But in the early days of my management company, you helped us I have a thing with startups, I guess, now that I say that out loud. But we started our management company, and you were wonderful. You helped us with all of our policies and procedures. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, I remember that, and I remember you telling me at that time. I remember sitting in a conference room at one of your properties, and you guys telling me that you built your own software and that you were thinking about taking it to market. And I remember trying to talk you out of it. So look what it's turned into here.
Well, I'm so excited that you're going to be joining us today. A very relevant topic that I asked you to come and speak about. So let me tell the audience, let me tell you guys a little bit about what you've done and why I thought you would be just a great person to talk to our audience about this topic. So, as I mentioned, Rich is the NOI coach. It's a business that you run, and it's a coaching and consulting firm, and it's based in Michigan, which is where my whole family's at. You're a very successful person, a published author, if I remember. Over 20 years experience. You just said you're going to own that. But I love that you bring a no-nonsense approach to strategic planning, and you have a passion for employee development and culture building. I do too. I love that. I think that's what makes everything tick. And so you're an expert on that. But you also have quite a bit of background in the management of over $2 billion of real estate assets, with over $50 million of capital reinvestment strategies. So understanding the strategy of adding value to the assets, you can speak to that. You've also been involved with successful acquisitions, dispositions, merger facilitation, and repositions. Key to his portfolio is the management of highly distressed properties and those in court receivership, because apparently you like a real challenge.
I do. I love
that. Is a real challenge. So basically, how do I sum all that up? Rich has seen it all and done it all, I think, at this point.
Yeah. And you know what that doesn't, my bio doesn't say, but I started as a groundskeeper in this business. And I used to say I ended as the CEO of a company, but now I'm an investor. I own my own apartment portfolio. So that's what this industry, and when we talk about development of people, we're here with 11,000 of our closest friends, right?
Yes.
And these people are what bring that success to us. It's such a critical part of our success.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy you started as a groundskeeper? Because one of the things that I'm really proud of it, is I started as a single mom temp, low leasing, and just to come up through the ranks and to now be an investor back into the space that I love, it does mean something.
Absolutely.
But it's interesting for the topic, because we're going to talk about really managing. We have 2 topics. We're going to talk about managing investor expectations and that relationship as market conditions change. And so we know that market conditions in 2023 look very different than they have the last 2 years. And we see operational teams are adjusting in real time to increasing vacancies. Concessions are back in the market, staffing challenges. Well, I don't hear they're as bad initially as the Great Resignation, but they're still not back to pre-pandemic norms. So that's causing a lot of challenges. And, all of those things contribute to how people should be looking at their strategy to really maximize ROI. So as I think about our current environment, and you know this because we just talked about how long we've known each other, I go back to the Great Recession, which is when I was in property management. It's when we built Resman. The biggest challenge and learnings out of that time came back to managing the investor expectations, because we had 34 investors per asset, none of them for multifamily.
You were in the TIC world. I remember that.
Yeah.
Kill me now.
Yeah, kill me now. Well, we had a master tenant agreement, which was even worse. But we didn't have credited investors like we should have. I learned that after the fact. And so it really was. I spent an enormous amount of time with investors and trying to help them understand how we need to run the business when they had no concept. So that's really what I want to talk about, because, especially after you look at the distributions for the last 2 years, right? There's an initial fear and awe of the pandemic, but we know that we were able to make up that lost ground and then some. So distribution's been really healthy. But now as things are leveling out, rent growth is not the same. I hear it. People are having these challenging conversations around, we don't want to hurt the asset long term to maintain certain distributions today when they're struggling. So I wanted to dive into that with you. I want to talk about, what are the strategies for effectively managing your investor relationships so they continue to buy into the management company, and also how do you educate and inform them along the way, especially all those that came in post-Great Recession that have never been in a true downturn.
Right. We've got that issue also with our employees. We've got many of our employees talking about the Great Resignation.
Yeah.
As things get tough, they're going to realize that leasing an apartment it's not like taking candy from a baby. You have to work hard, So we're going to see some fallout from that. But going back to managing investor relations, I believe the secret to it is courageous conversations. I will tell you right now, my clients, I've got a lot of owner operators and just owners that are struggling with their management companies because they don't have good investor relations. But what's funny is I'm not the most popular guy on the block because I've been predicting this downturn for about 3 years now. I thought it was going to come a little bit sooner than it has, but we're in it now. And it's only going to get worse as we start to shed employees that don't make it through it and talking about it. But a pretty common conversation that I'm having with investors right now, it's not going to make me a popular guy, but I'm telling them we need to give people raises before they ask for them. We need to be doing market adjustments.
The industry is not good at that.
Right, but we need to be doing it because by the time they ask for it or by the time they're saying I'm going to go somewhere else and we're giving counter offers, it's too late. They've checked out, right? The second thing is we've been getting these phenomenal rent increases for the last 5 years. I mean, we haven't been able to find a cap, right? And
pre-pandemic, we were still seeing a healthy rent growth.
Oh, it was great.
I mean, not the same as double digits, but definitely, healthy.
And so we've hit that cap, and the problem is now investors are saying, but with inflation, if my costs are going up 8-9%, then I should be getting that rent growth. And what I'm having to remind investors is we got our money before. And if you really look at the inflation numbers, 70% of inflation is housing. Yeah. So we are inflation. Yeah. So we can't double dip on it. We can't say, well, because of inflation, we need more money if we are part of the inflation equation. So that's the hardest thing. Okay. And then obviously having those courageous conversations, because your investors, they also have debt horizons that they have to be meeting certain objectives and goals. And we need to be realistic about if we can do that. Because what we don't want to get into is back in the circumstance, you've been in the business long enough where you've had your strategy has been, I don't care who they are, just put the butts in the boxes because we've got a debt horizon that we have to hit. And then we degrade the quality of our tenants. We give away too many concessions. Kill me now. I hate that word. We just have to be realistic with what it is.
Yes, well, and I love that too. When you're thinking about it from a management perspective, is just because it's a down market doesn't mean you still can't lead and be a leader in a down market.
Absolutely. Everybody that's ever taken my CAM class or my CAPS class, they've heard this. I say, if you're in a submarket that's got 10,000 apartment homes and only 8,000 renters, all things being equal, everybody should be 80% occupied. But all things aren't equal. All that means you have to be 20% better than the average bear, and you don't have the problem, because that's what solves problems. Is people solve problems.
Also, we had another podcast with Barbara Savannah this morning where we're going to feel a little bit different about, non-renewal also starts a time of leaving.
Absolutely.
All things are not equal.
At one point in time, I had 55,000 doors in my portfolio, 55,000 doors nationwide. So we did all kinds of focus groups. And what we really determined is that most people decide, it's not a conscious decision, if they're going to renew their lease within 7 days of their move-in.
Wow,
It's
that's
a
great stat.
non-conscious
That's a
thing.
great stat.
So you're right. The non-renewal starts when they have that bad experience. The customer experience is critical. But I also always remind people, I'd love to say that we provide good customer service to our industry because we're just good people, but we do it so we can keep reaching into their pocket and taking out that money, and they're okay with it.
But earning the right to ask for more. But I think, we're not nonprofit, but I think the key part of that is earning it.
Absolutely.
And I can stand behind that. So if we think back to like the market conditions that we're seeing, and I actually agree with you. I did a podcast, actually it was a webinar with ALN Department Data, and we've done it 2 years in a row in January. And we go back a year ago, it was rainbows and unicorns, and it was interesting because we were in January and our webinar was different because the name of it was Sunny with a Chance of Rain, because we were thinking these market conditions are going to change. So now, that was kind of, warming people up to the idea. Then we come forward to this year, and we're like, oh, the rain is coming. The rain is here, and I agree with you.
And the storm's getting worse.
Next year's going to be tougher.
Yep.
I think this is where you've got to have that renewed focus on your operations, your strategy to maximize, and that's that key word, maximize the NOI opportunity, revenue opportunity, expense efficiencies, because you want to be stabilized and secure going into 2024. I think 2024 will be the roller coaster.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And everything you just said, it's a differentiator for you and your product because, how many of the other companies are run by somebody that has such a critical understanding of the business.
Yeah, and was built during one of our worst downturns ever. I remember, being in the 70s around me. My properties never got there, but I had competitors that I competed with that got done in the 70s for occupancy. But it's got to be an interesting conversation because I know there's reports that just came out recently about in April, the national occupancy was still 95%, right? We saw, I believe in May, one of the data providers is indicating there's $7 rent growth, and which is like $18 per year at 1%. So we want to prepare our investors. They're kind of getting sometimes mixed messages out in the market.
Oh, they are. They're out of the data houses as well because, there's still a pretty common belief that we are seriously undersupplied. And while that is true technically, based off of the sheer numbers, what we see is when a market retracts, we start to see household formations changing. And that changes the supply-demand equation. All of a sudden, instead of getting my own apartment, I'm going to get a roommate. Yep. 2 households become 1, and it changes our horizon. And that kind of stuff happens, and the data houses don't see that until after it's done.
Right. So it causes more reaction.
Absolutely.
So let's dive into that a little bit. So we're talking about how to have these conversations with their investors. What advice would you give right now? Like what is a fee manager? Because we know things get competitive in that regard too. And what needs to be communicated? What's the best? What are the top things they really need to tackle so that as numbers change, because they're going to, and just because your returns or NOI, is not the same sort of numbers as last year, doesn't mean you don't have the right management company. We know investors who are not used to this can make that major decision or start leaning into the business, questioning and looking to maybe change management. To be honest, they have a great management. So if I'm that property manager, how do I manage that situation and retain that business?
I think that going back to the courageous conversations with them, don't try to hide things, don't try to sugarcoat things, be truthful with them, be direct. Because here's the thing, is as property managers, we've all seen it. When things get tough, you see that person that's not performing, a manager at a property or a leasing person that's not performing, and so we decide, we got to change the person. Well, we're making the exact same decision with our employees as our investors are making with us as managers, right?
That's a great point.
So, we have to say, if we want people to give us some free agency, then we need to invest in our people, and we need to make sure that even when the market is tough, when they're dealt a bad hand and they lose that hand, that's, even the best poker players in the world can't always win with a bad hand.
I love this concept of courageous conversations. There's books about that, radical candor. You can't get out in front of it fast enough.
Yeah.
And I think probably the key, I don't have assets right now to speak on, but I know for us, one of the secrets, because back in the 1031 days, right, when I first started trying to get investors into our assets, we had 25 competitors in the space. When we ended, like after the Great Recession, there's 5. Now, I'm not saying there were not more than the market, but there was 25 on our radar that we actively competed against, and we were one of the 5 that survived. And part of that conversation was exactly that, getting out in front of it, and you got to have the solution. It's having the plan. And it's funny because even at times when I've had different investors come into Resume, I cannot stress enough, it's not just about informing, it's educating. Right?
Yeah. And I think that's it, because it all directly equates to our life experience. When our residents see, 2 months free given away down the street, how do we keep them? Right? How do we? And it really is through being able to communicate intentionally and effectively, so that people feel like things aren't going well, but I'm in the best hands.
And I would think too that even if you're not getting a lot of pushback now, right? Because the people are still performing. I can see it in my restaurant customers. Don't underestimate your need to still prove up your value and engage with your investors so that you don't open that door doesn't open in the future.
Right.
Yeah.
And every investor is unique, and anybody that's spent any part of their time in their career working with investors, you working with 20 plus on each deal, understand them, communicate with them the way they want to be communicated with, not the way you want to do it. Don't try to fit everybody into the same bucket of patterns that you have. Some people, data is going to matter to them. Others, relationship is going to matter. Know the difference.
Yep. Some just want to come out and see the property, hasn't fallen down.
Yep.
So I like that you said something a few minutes ago about the way we approach our employees when we have someone that's underperforming. And we literally have coaching in your business. So I know how passionate you are about this, but I think that's something I want to dive into, because when we I've heard it from customers in the past, and even now, like people who maybe didn't come to NAA, there's a challenge of getting buy-in for the investment into our people. So talk to us a little bit about your beliefs about the ROI, investing in our teams, and why is it more important today than probably 2 years ago?
Because we are heading into a downturn market, and I can't even say, you said it earlier, we're not coming out of the Great Resignation. We are just learning to deal with it. We sit here amongst a lot of suppliers that are helping us to do more with less as it relates to people. But we are not at a place right now where we can afford to lose people. And the number one way to keep people, it's not just about pay. We know that. How many studies have shown us that? It's about showing people there's a future. It's about showing people that you can start off as a groundskeeper and work your way through maintenance and eventually be an investor, right?
Yeah.
That's a story that people need to see. They need to see that there is more than the job they have today. And it's through talent development. It's through our education offerings. It's through sending people to wonderful events like this, through some of the programs that National Apartment Association has, all those things.
So you've been a consultant. I mean, you worked with us at Sequoia. How do you advise? What does a property management, a fee manager, what do they need to bring to the table when they're trying to get those budgets approved with their investors, get the sign off to funds going to their region, local affiliate, state, or I actually believe honestly that NAA is for our company. We always came to NAA just because I think people understand the magnitude of what they're part of has weight, right? For how they look at their career opportunities. But how do you win that battle? What's that nugget they need to bring to that meeting to get that done?
ROI. Yeah, every time a property manager goes to an event like this, every time they go to a designation or certification program, every time they go to a seminar, they need to come back and they need to illustrate how what they got from it provides more NOI. And when they can do that, and then take it a step further and teach them how they can capitalize that NOI growth into value. And then they can say, you know what? Yeah, you spent, let's say, $3,000 or maybe $4,000 to send me to this event. With housing and everything, that's about what it costs. But you know what? I walked the trade show floor. I found 4 new business partners, and these decisions that we made led to these outcomes, this impact on NOI, and it equates to $1.2 million in value. So would you spend $4,000 again to find $1.2 million in value?
Awesome.
Every year. But it's incumbent. Most of the time we come back and we talk about the parties.
Well,
right?
And thank you for saying what you just said. But this goes back to the fundamentals of running a business, not having asset babysitters, right? And having them understand that that's a multi-million-dollar asset. You need to have a multi-million-dollar CEO attitude about the business that you're part of.
When you're talking to investors, who is your audience? They're investors.
Yep.
Investors continue to invest in things that pay off.
That's a great point. Oh my God. We need a session about this. Investors are investors.
Let's do it.
You got to have that. You got to give them that meat. Now, I love that. And I think tying it back, having them come back and year over year. So what if you haven't ever been before?
Then you have to convince them to take a flyer on something, which they will as well. But you talk to other people. You reach out to people that have been here and say, what did you take from it? What did you get from that?
Yes.
Because this trade show alone, everybody loves walking around in the tchotchkes that everybody gives out and the great coffee bar that you guys have, all that. That stuff is great. But you build relationships here that may not manifest today, but it'll manifest somewhere in the future. You've got a very long lead sales cycle, right? I mean, because people don't just change their systems overnight, but it's the seeds that you sow, and it's the same thing that you have with every one of these things. The education sessions, it's not necessarily what we as presenters, because I'm doing 3 sessions here. I hope it's not something that I say that changes your life. I hope it's something that you think while you're in my session that changes your life, because that's where the real brilliance happens.
Yep. Case in point, I remember years and years and years ago when I did not realize what I was doing to my lease ups, and I had no concept of lease expiration management, and I basically screwed over the team behind me that had the stabilized asset. And I didn't realize the significance of that until through merger and acquisitions that I ended up going back to manage the assets that I had leased up, and I had to deal with the mess that I had left behind. And it was a very eye-opening thing, but it also was simultaneous. There was a speaker, and she was talking about renewals and the renewal strategy with lease and trying back lease expirations, and it clicked. And you're right, it got me thinking about it. And from that, I remember putting all this together. There was a lease up that we had in Plano, Texas, where you put this in place. We didn't do anything less than a 12-month lease with that asset. And we stabilized the best performing asset, and it exceeded NAA's income and expense survey for garden style that year by almost $1,000 a unit.
Right.
And it was because of thinking differently, which now that same practical real world, put it in resume. There's a whole info around this.
Absolutely.
Because it does make a difference.
Absolutely. And that started with thoughts that happened at a training for you. It matters. Because what I've learned about training and development is that, we've always heard training just in time and just enough, or just in time. It's just in time and just enough and then it's repetition.
Yes.
Because, people come through my CAM classes or CAPS classes or my seminars, and they happen to come because that's when I'm in town and doing it.
Yeah.
But then they come back a couple years later and they go to a class and I say the same thing, and they're like, that hit me. When you're reading a book or you watch a movie or you hear a song that you've known you've done before, but all of a sudden you're like, I swear this wasn't here before. But it's because now you're ready to hear it.
Yes.
And I think that's the consistency of training. It's not a destination. It's a journey. We have to keep going.
We have to keep learning.
And we have to go into classes here. And even if we say, you know what, I'm pretty good with that. But you go into it and you open your mind and say, you know what, it might change. And I'll tell you, change is coming at us at an exponential rate, says the old 50-year-old. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think, to just add the last piece to that is the networking.
Yeah.
The networking, it's funny, Resonance always had, and we came out of the gates with an open API. And part of why that was so important to us as a founding vision was because so many of my, and this, it wasn't just suppliers, but there were suppliers that I met through these trade shows. Some of them became, I was their customer. But a lot of them were from my side of the fence originally. And leaning into my career, the bouncing ideas off, on top of all the great speakers and people you walk up and get a card. People are so giving of their time. That's what makes multifamily family. And you don't have to be the one with all the answers. There's a resource. There's an enormous amount of resources in this space. But there are people who've never been to an event like this. They're out on that island, or they feel like they're out on their island, and it doesn't have to be that way. So one of the things we're going to wrap with now is if you are out there and you've never been to NAA or any of your trade shows, you really want to fight for this, you need to use this video. Just play this video on your behalf to help get you that buy-in and investment. We're living and breathing examples of everything we've learned, gained, product in the industry. I don't think I knew that you were a groundskeeper, but we are legitimately products of this industry. Now, like amazing specialists.
Well, and not only go to the things, but step out of your comfort zone. Because I know a lot of people, they get here and then they become a wallflower.
Yeah.
You have to. Life begins at the edge of your comfort zone, and so you have to get to that uncomfortable place. Because when I moved from property management into owning my own company, I had about 700 people in my address book at that time that I had met here in these types of events.
Yes.
I sent an email to every one of those people. That was 17 years ago, 18 years ago now, and I've never stopped working. I've never done another moment of marketing, and it's because of, you talk about giving people. These people have just really given back to me, and it's been a wonderful journey. We're in a great business, and even in tough times, we're in a great business.
Yeah. It is. And you know what you just said? Remember what I said we started with? Even in those tough times, sometimes you're coming across somebody that has the right thing to say at the right time.
Absolutely.
And you need to hear it.
Absolutely.
So, awesome. Well, this isn't at all long enough. So I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I am. Because I would really love for us to do a real full-length podcast.
I'm all in
you come
for
through
it.
Dallas. I like to do them in person. So, I'm a tech person, but I'm also a traditionalist. And I love FaceTime.
I always love coming to Dallas. And my foster daughter lives there now, so it always gives me a good reason to come. So.
All right, so we're going to do some more in-depth stuff because you have some great coaching that you can give out to the audience. I'd love to promote you any way that I can. Thank you for just being you. And you're a hell of an NOI coach.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. Always enjoy my time with you.
Awesome. Well, guys, that's a wrap for us right now. So thank you again for joining us live at Apartmentalize 2023. I really hope that you enjoyed the podcast and that you really took some great strategies away. I know I was intrigued. You made me get fired up and like, wish I had a property again, which nobody should say that, but I do. But remember, I think the big takeaway from this is this was just a small sampling of the amazing thought leadership that's here and the content that's available at NAA Apartmentalize. So we hope to see you next year in Philadelphia, 2024. So be sure to like us and share Prop Talk, where we decode the property management space one episode at a time. Bye, guys.